Both horror and sci-fi are prominent and popular genres in film, and have distinctive characteristics that are similar. I'll be discussing and comparing the formats and purpose, the generic conventions and characteristics, the audience expectations and interpretations, and the narrative structures. In regard to purpose, distribution is something which is important, as Netflix and other streaming services have become significant competitors in terms of film distribution. They allow a wider audience of people to see the film who perhaps would be put off by the cost of cinemas and maybe don't have time to go see the films. Netflix has created an on-demand service which allows films and TV shows to be more accessible. The company has also produced both horror and sci-fi films, including Annihilation, Season 3 and 4 of Black Mirror, Gerald's Game, and Veronica. However, this could be an issue if a film was intended for general release, and perhaps would benefit more by being seen in a cinema. The film Annihilation was first intended to have wide release, but then was given to Netflix to be released in February after screenings of the film only took place in the US, Canada, and China. This most likely was a decision made by Paramount because of finance or ease of availability which Netflix brings. However, a lot of horror films and sci-fi films benefit visually and in terms of sound from being released in cinemas, as it helps heighten a scary or tense atmosphere. The advertisement for the film Mother even featured the line, "Seeing is believing," urging viewers that the best way to experience this film is for yourself and on the big screen. Budget isn't always a contributing factor to the success of a horror or sci-fi film, and can be more to do with the subject matter and perhaps relates to when they were released. A lot of modern-day horror films focus on the paranormal because we have a heightened fear of the unknown and something that we cannot control or stop. In 2017, the Stephen King film It brought in $700.2 million and was a massive success in terms of popularity for horror. Found footage was a significant trend for horror after the Blair Witch Project and the popularity of paranormal activity, but now many see the subgenre as overused and not as effective as it once was. Furthermore, something considered scary in the 1920s, like Nosferatu, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, or even films later like The Creature from the Black Lagoon or Eyes Without a Face, would not be considered that scary in today's standards. This change in audience tastes in relation to release date can also be significant in regards to sci-fi, as the film Invasion of the Body Snatchers, released in 1978 and a remake, seemed to have an underlying message about the dangers of a Soviet invasion, something more worrying for people when the Soviet Union was a threat to the US. Many modern-day sci-fi films explore the effect technological development will have on us as humans, and is not just focused on its impact on wider society. The 2016 film Passengers demonstrates the change in focus well, as the film tells the story of the relationship between two passengers on board of a spaceship transporting people to a new world, who are woken up 90 years too early. The purpose of horror is to unsettle and scare the audience, but entertain them as well. It has a significant amount of subgenres and tropes that differ from each film, which can distinguish it as a horror. Perhaps the most popular themes in horror involve death or murder, with a film like American Psycho following the life of a chaotic and murderous yuppie during the 1980s. Revenge, which is a prominent part of Stephen King's Carrie, which centres on a bullied teen pushed to her breaking point. Religious beliefs, normally crossed with paranormal, which is shown in The Witch, as it tells the story of a family in 1860 who are banished from the Puritan Christian colony and are tortured by the threat of a witch living in a nearby forest. And finally, survival from a lot of things, like strange alien creatures in The Descent. The main theme of sci-fi films are about exploration of different versions of our world, one with further advancements and tends to argue the ethics of scientific development. They also highlight good and evil and abuses of power. Not all sci-fi films take place in a reality further than ours, or presents one vastly out of reach. Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind is about a man distraught by his girlfriend erasing all memory of him, and how he does the same to himself. And her focuses on the relationship a man develops with an AI, which soon turns into something more human than he expected. Both of these films analyse the effects of scientific development on people. The structure of typical horror films is supported by Todorov's narrative theory. Trailers easily set out this structure. In the trailer for the film The Possession, the state of equilibrium is before M discovers the antique box. The disruption is M opening that box and letting out a demon, followed by her eventually being possessed and acting increasingly strange to her family. The trailer then suggests ways that the disruption can be reversed or repaired, something like an exorcism or religious involvement, but does not reveal too much about the conclusion or plot. The general structure to a sci-fi film is very similar to the horror structure. It includes an introduction. This sets up the scene and introduces the characters, showing us who they are, what part they had in the story, and perhaps establishing a connection with the audience and their characteristics. Jurassic Park demonstrates this perfectly. We meet the main characters as they go to Jurassic Park on a helicopter. Once they've reached the island, all establishing information has been shared and the audience is ready for the story to begin. Then a complication follows. This is the most important part of the story and allows character development around the complication and creates drama. This could be anything in terms of sci-fi. Jurassic Park, again, shows this aspect of narrative very well. The complication begins when each character becomes separated in the park, at night, when the power's off, which then lets the T-Rex out on the loose. Some would say that Jurassic Park introduces the complication in the prologue, showing that the dinosaurs are very dangerous and not just an attraction. This leads the audience to feel tense about the advancements in dinosaurs taking place. After that is the climax. Before the resolution of the narrative, the story seems to go through a lot of highs and lows in terms of tension. This keeps the audience's attention and works to have them more invested. The climax is the section of narrative where it's the most exciting and most crucial. Normally in both horror and sci-fi, it's when the main characters face the most ruthless enemy or deal with the most difficult task. Again, Jurassic Park plays well into creating this heightened tense atmosphere. The velociraptors are featured in the kitchen scene, perhaps because they are the most dangerous because of their intelligence when it comes to hunting. Even before the kitchen scene, throughout the film there is foreshadowing to the velociraptors being the most dangerous and cunning enemy. Dr. Grant even gives a speech saying how dangerous and scary they are.
Because Velociraptor's a pack hunter, you see. He uses coordinated attack patterns, and he is out in force today. And he slashes at you with this 6-inch retractable claw, like a razor, on the middle toe. He doesn't bother to bite your jugular like a lion, say. No. He slashes at you here.
This monologue could be directed right at the audience, telling them not to be fooled by the size of the velociraptors, or by the reputation of other dinosaurs being more dangerous or frightening than them, like the T-Rex. They also make the story cyclical. The velociraptor eating a park worker was what caused Dr. Grant and the other experts to visit the park. The climax is also significant because it helps the audience see how the characters have grown and developed throughout the film. Ultimately, the audience is supposed to be on the edge of their seat. Finally is the resolution. The resolution is after any conflict has been resolved, and is the aftermath and winding down of the situation. It also shows how the characters were changed by their experience. Cabin in the Woods is a great example of a film which demonstrates the tropes of horror. It even has the typical characters, which are the protagonist, who's usually female and are stereotypically presented as intelligent, sensible and innocent. Sometimes the events of the film change this though. The trope of the final girl is heavily featured in horror films as well, and the character Dana represents this trope. The antagonist. In The Cabin in the Woods, the Ancient Ones are the antagonists, and those who organise the sacrifices are the helpers. The sex appeal, normally played by a good-looking woman, who's usually the first to be killed. Then there is the unlikely hero. This is the character which the audience thinks is the hero due to their skills and role in the film, but is then killed. Kurt survives being killed by the zombies, and then heroically tries to escape. This however backfires, as he is killed by an invisible electric fence surrounding where they stayed. Two other characters in Cabin in the Woods are Marty and Holden. Marty maybe is just a character you expect to be killed straight away, because of his recreational habit, but then survives right to the end. While Holden maybe was added to bring diversity to the cast, as the rest of the characters are white. Two examples of frequently used sci-fi character types are the overly obsessed or mad scientist, who's thought to be originated by Victor Frankenstein in Mary Shelley's novel, Frankenstein. They tend to want to play God, or even make a great scientific development in society, but use that power to oppress or manipulate people. The second is a robot, which can either be bumbling smart or even sarcastic. They're sometimes added for comedic effect. If the film is a sci-fi horror or thriller, there'll normally be characters similar to the stereotypical horror characters. The film Alien has those exact characters. It features a group consisting of a leader, female member, sometimes for sex appeal, sometimes as a heroine, red shirts, who tend to be there just to have a cool or gruesome death, comedic relief, and some kind of AI, and an antagonist, which in terms of sci-fi is normally an alien or robot. There are many attributes in a horror film which are very important in creating tone. Something like setting is important to horror as it helps establish a feeling of isolation, like being in the woods, an abandoned or haunted house in the middle of nowhere. Basically, anywhere where there's no sign of hope is a good setting for a horror film. Some sci-fi films take place in an alternative timeline, normally in the future, or a historical past that is different from our history. In Never Let Me Go, cloning was introduced during World War II and drastically changed the value of human life. They can also be in space, other worlds, or alternative versions of Earth. Probably the most iconic and significant part of horror characteristics are the costumes, as that's what make the characters recognisable to the audiences. Many antagonists in horror films wear masks, keeping the mystery of who they are and furthering another element of the unknown. This means that they could be anyone, and also removes the humanity from the character. Masks are also a good way to unsettle the audience, as it presents them with eerie or scary imagery. Symbolic or scientific development is shown in futuristic props, costumes, and setting, allowing the audience to see how familiar elements of life have progressed, and also creates a connection between reality and fiction. Sci-fi is also associated with lavish and expensive special effects, as it helps create different worlds and different species, such as aliens. A lot of hype and audience expectation is built through trailers. Many will use some of the best scares to tease the audience. Also, some trailers will lead the audience on with what the story is about, but then add an element of twist in. One interesting use of marketing was in the Blair Witch Project, when the filmmakers wanted to make the audience believe the film was real and that they had stumbled on some big mystery hidden from the general public. The directors made a website which included a backstory for the Blair Witch, information on the filmmakers, which were actually the cast of the film, and later on the film distributors would use other tactics such as distributing missing posters all around Cannes the year of release, making a Blair Witch special and broadcasting it on the Science Channel, and even having the IMDb pages of the film's cast changed to say that they were presumed dead for a year after the release of the film. This shows that the filmmakers manipulated the audience expectation of the film to make them believe it was real, and greatly changed the way that they viewed it. Many felt that they were discovering some bigger conspiracy, and were terrified of seeing real footage of someone's disappearance and possible death. In regards to audience expectation, many expected Interstellar to be an epic sci-fi film which explored the state of the Earth's resources and how we were destroying it. Instead, Christopher Nolan created a story focused on a father and daughter relationship. Although still an epic achievement in sci-fi film, some may have been disappointed with the story's focus, as the trailer told a different story.